Home is a place.
No, no, no. Home is a feeling.
Home is my motherland.
It's more where you feel alive and inspired.
Well, I think we're talking about the same thing, aren't we? Home is where our story begins.
What's your story?
Homesick at Home every Friday from 9 to 10 p.m.
on Radio Van 103.1 with Ina MK
and Rina D.
Shot City, I'm coming home again.
We have the honor and the pleasure to host tonight Christoph Bierwirth, the UNHCR representative in Armenia.
I studied in Frankfurt 2 semesters, then went to Regensburg. That's a very nice middle-aged town in Bavaria. You find it on any globe because it's the most northern point of the Danube River. Then I studied a year abroad in Boulder, Colorado, in the US, and later as a postgraduate study also some semester in Speyer. I'm a lawyer by profession. I have both examens for lawyers, a university examen and what we call then the second state examen, which qualifies you as a judge. But after some years of teaching at University of Regensburg, I got the opportunity to join UNHCR, and that was my devotion, my call, if you may wish to say so. And it's about 27 years I work with UNHCR, mainly in Eastern Europe. I'm in Armenia since almost 5 years. I came on 1st September 2013, and it soon will be 11 years in the Caucasus, as I served before in Georgia, next door, also at exciting time, including the 2008 conflict. I love the Caucasus. I always dreamt to come and work in the Caucasus. I was in this part of the world first time in 1998 on missions, giving trainings already for UNHCR, and since that time I was fascinated. And to put it in one word, Caucasus is where you live more intensive than most other places.
Oh, really?
And I would
That's
say
a nice way to
one
put it.
year in Caucasus is as much as 3 years elsewhere. But I hope this is not deducted in the
Approximately.
What a geography. Oh, wow. You know, you've been everywhere.
And why Armenia? How did it happen? Can you tell us a bit?
We have a system where you can apply for posts. You have no guarantee. You should apply for minimum 3 posts, better 5 to 6. Armenia, I found it interesting because of the history, and with the German history and also, let's say, some German not so favorable role, you feel a certain responsibility. But before simplifying, it's mainly I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand a bit the Armenian culture. I must say I also worked at other places, mainly in Eastern Europe. I served in Ukraine. I served also some years at headquarters in Geneva. I was in Turkey in a regional function covering Eastern Europe, but also serving a lot on training missions in Central Asia and in the Balkan. And on missions, I also covered on quite some occasions Asian countries. I was several times in China. I was in Sri Lanka. Wow. And maybe the most exotic place, I was in North Korea for 5 days.
Moscow?
Which was in North Korea. Pyongyang,
North Korea. Oh.
Which was maybe the most alien but also interesting place I've seen in my career.
Wow. So how different is Armenia from all the other places you visit?
From all the other aliens you've seen.
Of course, one tends to say Armenia is different, but I think the starting point that everywhere in the world, certain basic needs, basic desires are very similar, and I think we should never forget that before we're looking at the nuances. But everywhere in the world, parents dream of their children have a better life. Everywhere, people first and foremost need food, a roof over their head. They need someone who cares about them and someone they can care for. So before we come to the nuances, I think there's a big common denominator in human nature. What is different in Armenia is probably a lot coming from the history. There is this stronger than elsewhere look to the past, which is it's important. You should never forget the roots, but maybe it would be good at one stage
To
one
look
eye to the
forward.
back and one eye forward. But this observation has a very interesting impact. It makes, I think, Armenian society, and in particular the intellectual society, a very thoughtful people, a very intellectual people. I must say there are rarely countries where I had so much mind-enriching discussions. Everywhere you have interesting interlocutors, but here, especially coming from Georgia, where you had the art of the Tamadan, you had the art of the Supra, but here you have rarely any coming together in whatever circumstances, where not at one stage philosophy comes up or history, and this is sometimes heavy, but most of the time I enjoy this very much, and it's mind-provoking and mind-enriching. So
Maybe you got used to it.
maybe I got used to it. It will be interesting.
And you will miss it, I'm sure, one day.
No doubt. But I often wonder, after 11 years Caucasus with these two sites, and I've been in Baku as well on several missions, how will I ever be able to readjust in the western part of Europe? I will soon leave for Vienna. I have a post there as of September. That will be an interesting self-experiment.
Keep that in mind, because we have to go on a short advertisement break. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we have a very interesting guest tonight, Mr. Christoph Bierwirth, and we are going to have 50 more minutes to have a chat with him. Stay tuned. This is Homesick at Home. Home is a place.
No. Home is a feeling.
Home is my motherland.
It's more where you feel alive and inspired.
Well, I think we're talking about the same thing, aren't we? Home is where our story begins.
What's your story?
Homesick at Home every Friday from 9 to 10 p.m.
On Radio Van 103.1 with Ina MK
and Rina D.
Shy City, I'm coming home again.
Good evening once again. For those of you who just tuned in, I have to reintroduce our guest. So we have the honor and the pleasure to host tonight Christoph Bierwirth, the UNHCR representative in Armenia. So, and we want to mention that we have been waiting for this meeting for 2 weeks. We had a problem with our power last Friday, and we were very sad that we missed the meeting. But tonight we're gonna ask all our questions and discover our the personality of our guest. First of all, we heard a lot about you, but tonight we are gonna ask some personal questions as well.
And we had the pleasure of seeing you twice, because you were here last week but we couldn't get the show going, so again this Friday.
So that's a plus. Yeah. Okay, so you wanted to say something about the title of our show, I think. Let's
I will
it.
do with pleasure. But we have to add, we saw not only twice, but twice in very different perspective. Once in the dark, in the truest sense of the word, and now in the limelight.
So we can have the title
enjoyable.
From Dark to Light.
From dark to light, and that's the right direction to move. I must say, when my assistants proposed to come to your show, and I heard this Homesick at Home with Ed, could be read at Ed as a computer science,
Yeah.
Right, right.
at being homesick at home. I liked it from many perspectives, and that's why I quickly agreed. It's the title already symbolizes that you can have and feel at home at two places. You can have an old home and a new home and a present home and a permanent home and a temporary home. The title triggers reflection on what is actually home, and if you permit, I would like to share a few thoughts on that.
By the way, it's
And-
one of our questions that we
Yes.
always ask our guests.
And
Go ahead.
two great minds think alike, one would say. But it also has a link to actually what is the core of our work, protecting refugees, finding durable solutions for refugees, for other displaced. And if you put all the legal provisions aside, refugee protection is about helping people to find a new home, to feel welcome. When I prepared a bit for this session, I looked up some quotes, and
Wow.
one of the one which struck me most, it's from a German philosopher, Karl Jaspers, and he said, "Home is where I understand and where I am understood." And this is exactly what
nice
it is. And it's not only language; it is
Yes.
The heart.
being understood in all your being, in all your behavior, in maybe all your difference. So you can be home even being slightly different or having a different background. But to be at home, it also requires you coming to a new environment to engage, to try to understand, to try to communicate, to interact with the home community. And if I read that quote and think about what we do in our daily work, caring for displaced people in Armenia, less now with those who fled after the original conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, but primarily, but not confined to the people who fled the conflict in Syria, over 20,000, now some maybe 12, 13,000, 14,000 are still in the country. Some other hundreds from Ukraine, the conflicts from Iraq, from Iran, some people from Yemen. We have. It's all about helping them to understand Armenia, to get the feet on the ground, but on the other hand, engaging, and for example, by a radio program as today with the Armenian community, and explain why people come, not voluntarily, open their minds a bit, and once the mind's allowed to communicate, then maybe also open the heart. So refugee protection is about finding a new home for people who lost, hopefully only temporarily, their old home. And homesick at home is still possible, even if you find a new home.
If
and
you're
Yes.
someone,
and I will give a try with some short quote in Armenian, and
Sure.
forgive me if it sounds
Oh.
bad. It's
exclusively for Radio One.
for Radio
Christoph.
One. I found it in the Western Armenian transcript. It's, I think, from an anonymous author, but it was toned later in a song, and you all maybe know what I refer to. I speak of Krounk, the crane.
Ah, Krounk.
And
The crane.
it still touches me. I read it first in a German transcript in an old book from 1930, and it makes gooseskin. So allow me to quote the first strophe. Krounk, usti kugas tsara em tsernit. Krounk, me ashkaren chaprik mechunis. Mi vazis jeramit shutov ke hasnis. Krounk, me ashkaren chaprik mechunis. This first strophe of the poem, where displaced Armenian see the crane flying above and from the deep of their soul cry for news.
Yeah.
This is something we feel today, and so many Syrians, even at the time of TV and internet, they yearn for for news from home, and they yearn for news which is not only the drastic picture they see in the TV. They want to know, how is grandfather doing, how is the neighbor doing, how is a sick child. They asked about how is the houses, how is the atmosphere, how are all the little things which you cannot put in words over TV or radio.
Right.
You can only put in words
From a heart.
from the heart, from father to son, from mother to daughter, from husband to wife. So this very old poem, I think, could be a good motto for your show.
Christoph, thank you so much for this touching spirit
Yes,
that
that
you
was very
just
touching.
passed to us and that you filled with in our whole studio. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that our listeners felt it right now. Thank you.
Yes.
We will definitely use this motto, and we will
Yes.
use
It's very touching.
this as a title for this episode. Where were we?
We lost it. You know?
We
It
got
was-
really emotional here.
Yes, it was very touching. Wow. So, Christoph, I've had the pleasure of being acquainted with you a while back.
Before,
Yes, and I think I arrived about the same time as you arrived in Armenia. And I've been lucky enough to be working with the UNHCR. Can you tell us more about what you do? Like, what is it exactly? How?
yes, well, I start with a mandate which is given globally. So UNHCR has a task to provide international protection to refugees and to assist states in finding durable solutions. Durable solutions mainly is local integration where the refugees went to. It can be, in the ideal scenario, return home, once return is possible in safety and dignity. And for some refugees, very special cases, it can be resettlement to a third country. In Armenia, you can roughly say we do three, maybe four major activities. One is helping the authorities to further build up the asylum system. We have a functioning asylum system in Armenia. We have a law, we have an authority, we have a little bit substandard reception facility which needs to be upgraded. But we have all the basics in place. So now the work goes on further quality improvement and adjusting capacities to the evolving need.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest activity we engage now, also from the financial resources, total budget is in Armenia is about 1.4 million now. That's down from a peak of 2.5 million at the max of the influx of people coming from Syria. Is helping with integration of people from Syria, and that entails vocational training, income generation grants. We had a microcredit which still is revolving. It includes language training. People from Syria speak Western Armenia, not Eastern Armenian. They understand each other, but when it comes to business, they need to learn a bit. It includes how to do business in Armenia training. You may be surprised because Syrians are very good businessmen and they have good skills and a super developed service culture. I don't have to explain it. You see it in daily life in Yerevan and in the many coffee shops and restaurants and car repairs. But in Syria, they had a very different style. They had a handshake economy, a bazaar economy, and you better didn't break a promise. In post-Soviet Armenia, you better write a contract, you sign, you involve a lawyer if you have a bigger contract. So people had to learn it, and unfortunately, some had to learn it the bitter way. So one of the lessons for us learned was give opportunities to familiarize Syrian to be again entrepreneurs with habits here. We complement this with a humanitarian component, some complementary medical services given to our partner Mission Armenia, and also maybe financially very important, we have a rental subsidy project which helps refugees, particularly in the first 6 months after arrival, when they have to get the feet on the ground, to finance some humble accommodation. Other areas we are engaged is the response to the Karabakh displacement after the 2016 escalation of the conflict. We are happy that most people who were displaced at that time, over 2,000 people at peak, could return home.
Wow.
But we still have 600 people from that time, mainly from the village of Talysh, which is not safe to return. At least part of the village is not safe. And they are still in Armenia. They are now mainstreamed in our normal assistance programs and primarily live in Sharat Sawan town. And then the secondary topic we have, apart from refugees, we look also in issues related to prevention and reduction of statelessness.
Wow, amazing. Thank you for sharing this with us. And you spoke earlier about home, and you read these beautiful lines about Krounk and home.
In Armenian.
In Armenian, yeah. This was exclusive.
Yes.
We're gonna brag about this
Yes.
later, of course. And I have a question to you. Did Armenia make you feel like home? And what did you miss about your home, your own home? Back in
Actually, I feel very much at home here, and I feel well integrated, not least having a team which is not, as in some other countries, segregating the international staff from the local, but it takes two to dance tango, so maybe my style also helps. I like your cuisine. I like also the enriched Western Armenian cuisine and Lebanese Armenian cuisine. And I must say, I felt quite at home at many places I was in, but sometimes I missed something. And in Turkey, for example, what I missed most was the forest. The forest I know at home, because the forest for me is a place I go to and walk if I need to contemplate about something more difficult, and not only work. It could be very private. And in Armenia, you find these forests. Maybe not directly in Yerevan so much,
in
but
the
if
regions.
you go to Dilijan or to the south. So there's sometimes the language or culture in the own language. You have a lot of culture. I like your concerts. I like the jazz, if it wouldn't be not always so late.
We were talking
And
about
I must say I like very much your museums. I had not expected such a rich museum culture, the National Museum, but also hidden places like the Russian Art Museum, the Modern Art Museum, where hardly anyone is, and there always the two babushkas have to switch on the light, and then you find treasures. And maybe my most favorite is a renovated Sayan Museum.
Saryan.
But going now to Vienna, I must say I wait for more in that sphere.
Sure,
To come, I
course.
have to admit this.
You mentioned your team.
I knew you were going to ask
Yes,
this.
you mentioned your team, and I need to take a moment to mention Anahit.
yes,
and to
yes,
say
yes.
hello to her. Anahit Jan, we know that you're watching us very
Yes,
carefully.
we say hello.
No, for the first few minutes, we had some technical issues with our sound, and I know that Anahit was very nervous. But we want to say hello to you right now.
Hello.
Yeah,
and,
hello.
And seriously,
And
this
tell
woman,
her that everything is
this
okay
woman,
now.
I really look up to her, and I appreciate the work she's doing, because seriously, she's like a backbone in the UNHCR.
I subscribe fully to what you what you
Yes.
say, and even if sometimes I call Anahit our propaganda minister, I mean that from the heart. But she's so much more. She's the core of our network. And now, even more serious, when you do humanitarian work, it is about building networks.
Yes.
It's
Of course.
one of the key messages I can share is no one, not even the UN, can do things alone. And when it comes to refugee integration and
Yes.
quite significant numbers for Armenia, maybe they sound small compared to Turkey or Jordan, but for Armenia, 20,000 people having arrived was quite a challenge. So one of the first things to pass on is not each NGO, this is my sphere, this I keep for myself, but reaching out, having a network, communicating, coordinating, having cross referrals, knowing who does what
Yes.
better sometimes than myself. And if I look back now after almost 5 years, maybe one of the achievements we have reached is that now the whole NGO community, together with the authorities, migration service, ministries, things are now evolving very interestingly, have started to work together and bringing resources from different ports. So I'm very happy that a lot of philanthropists from the diaspora, Rafiad Ajalyan being one of the many, IDEA Foundation, Gulbenkian Foundation, AGBU, they all with their donors contribute to a common coordinated effort, not necessarily prescribed, because sometimes if you prescribe too much you lose the innovation, but working it together in a way that we have some synergies and a common goal. And this is, again, bringing to the title, making Armenia the home, at least the temporary home for people who had to flee war and conflict and persecution, not only from Syria, but other places as well.
Thank you so much.
Yes. I want to ask a different kind of question right now. You were mentioning the food. You mentioned the food in Armenia. What's your favorite Armenian dish?
Ooh, I like dolma very much, but when it comes to homemade food,
Okay.
and it's winter, I like harissa. I just love
Harissa,
I just love harissa.
Yes.
But I would not eat it anymore in a restaurant. Then it's frozen. Harissa must come in the family, cooked for long, and
Cooked with
then
love.
you cannot stop eating.
He knows the real thing.
Yes.
What would you change about Armenia?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a question at a very important time. Starting with something simple, one of the few things I really dislike is the high rate of smokers, and
okay.
it's everyone's own decision. But if I go to the park and aim at some fresh air, and then 9 out of 10 men are smoking, that's something I wish it will change, especially if there are children.
I think it will.
It has started to.
I notice it, and if you look at Georgia, everyone said it's impossible to have non-smoking rules in restaurants and public places. It works quite well. So
It does.
even smokers actually appreciate if in a restaurant there's non-smoking, and then they go out and smoke outside.
Yeah.
But that is something quick fix, simple. I think the other topic to reflect on is Armenian relation with rules. It's not implying that things are anarchic, not at all. But I see quite often, is this really necessary? Can I circumvent? What happens if I don't stick to certain rules? And this is explainable. I think it comes from the past, where very often the rule was used against the individual, and the very nature of rules should be to protect the individual, to protect the weak against the strong, to prevent that the man is man's wolf. So if you have good rules, everyone should stand with it, even if on one occasion the rule maybe prefer the neighbor and not me, but you have the whole system. I find in the transition we have now, all this fear of having rules and maybe not just rules, application of rules, which forget about the real rationale behind having the rules.
Yes.
It's a good moment to reflect on this, to more think of accepting rules, and where rules are not proper, this can be not just ignore it, but work in a common effort with all voices heard to improve the rules and improve the interpretation of the rules. This said, it's more a philosophical point. I note you have crime rates in Armenia which are very low compared to other countries. So I'm not speaking of rule breaking in the sense of crime, but it's this little thing.
Yeah.
Can I evade the tax? Do I put on the taximeter and the light gets wet and it counts? I speak more of these little things.
Petty crime.
But
Do I have to
wouldn't
cross
even
the
use
street?
that term. But it would be very good if, in the spirit now of the innovation, there comes a more thorough, deep trust in this is our rules. This is not Soviet rule. This is not Ottoman rules. This is
It's
our
common
rules,
rules.
and we stick to it.
Yes.
It's more for reflection. It's not something foreigners should tell, and we should not say these rules should be yours. It must come from the inside. But I think we should, especially now in this particular moment in modern Armenian history, to have a more honest dialogue among Armenians on what would be the best rules in a number of spheres.
Yes, and being ready for that change, you know.
Yes, and people little by little are walking towards this conscious.
What you say is very right. Being ready, it goes back to the values, and it goes back to the individual feelings to the state. And I think the time is ripe to really reach this.
Yes,
the state is we. The state should be we.
Of course, because demanding change is a responsibility as well.
Indeed.
So we should be ready for that. Christoph, soon you will be leaving Armenia. What is it that you will take back with you?
How can you do that to us?
Well, we have to. This is our life. We have to rotate.
But you will come back and visit us,
I
for
will
sure.
definitely come back. I actually even have a post which brings me regularly back into Caucasus. I will be involved in the Geneva International discussions, which bring together Georgia, Russia, Abkhazia, South Ossetia. The memory which I will never forget is the hospitality I have observed in 2016 when hundreds of people were fleeing, mainly women, children, elderly, were fleeing from Karabakh, and they were hosted by fellow Armenians, relatives, old neighbors, family, friends. And I noticed it was not the richest segments of society. It was often the very, very poorest segments of society which opened their hearts, which opened their houses, which showed the biggest generosity. So this deep-rooted value of hospitality is something Armenia can be very proud of. I don't say it's only in Armenia. You have good experience in Georgia and in Azerbaijan also in this. But I personally, from these 5 years, this really formed me, and to have lived also through a peaceful and extraordinary peaceful revolution is an experience you will not forget, and it was a privilege to have experienced this, hoping that it concludes as peaceful as it started, and it concludes inclusively, not one against the other, but reaching out to all who did and can contribute to the society in the future. So I wish Armenia all the very best in this exciting moment, but I've lacked the intellectual capacity before, and I should add the enthusiasm of the youth.
Yes.
Yeah, it was
I'm
amazing.
more
Yes.
than cautiously optimistic, as some of the diplomats used to say. I really wish it you all the best.
Well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
sharing these thoughts with us. Christoph, do you remember when you got your first salary?
Oh yes, yes. The first time I got some money, that was not salary, that was hourly.
Mm-hmm.
I was 14, and I was cleaning the yard of a small workshop of a neighbor who had a electro machine repair and pump repair shop. It was 4 Deutschmark 50 Pfennige, or something like €2.25.
Great.
And then the real salary on a monthly basis was in my first semester holidays as a student. I worked with a electricity distributor,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a project to introduce warming pumps. It's like a system for heating, reverse like a refrigerator. And to have that work, they have to find out the temperature in different parts of their distribution area, because if it gets below 3 degrees minus,
Mm-hmm.
it's not at all economically. So I got thousands of rolls with temperature measures over entire years, and I had to transform that in computer tables.
Oh,
And
Oh,
it was
that's
a little
tough.
bit a boring job, but for a good cause, climate protection. And I remember very much I was too eager, working very quickly. And after 3 weeks, I presented my interim findings,
Mm-hmm.
and my Nachalnik at that time said, "So, but we planned you to stay for 2 months. If you continue like this, in 6 weeks it's over." So I had to adjust my speed a little bit. But yeah, that was the first confrontation with work reality. And later, when I worked at the university teaching and researching, I must still say that is, and still what I do today, it's half work and half pleasure. And if you have non-alienated work, I think you're very, very privileged. So
Yes.
It's all about your amazing positive attitude, I
yes,
think.
yes.
This is the half, even if not the most important part about work.
Yes, and it's very important too, especially in this kind of work
Sphere.
field. Yes. Christoph, you have been many places. We spoke about the feeling of home. You said, you quoted. Do you ever feel homesick?
definitely yes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not something permanently. It's something triggered. Examples. One example I gave. It's like the forest.
Mm-hmm.
When you need the forest atmosphere because it's the place of contemplation, then then you miss it. I must say the period when my my mother died early. My father was very sick and later passed away. You felt very homesick because you were not there. I managed to go home, but for some weeks, and that's difficult. That gives a bad consciousness. Even if I had parents who always said, "No, this is your route in life," and they were encouraged. But that are the moment when actually those at home need you, and you cannot be. And other moments are like eating something and some dishes from my grandmother or from my mother. We have something roulades.
What
It's
is it?
rolled beef meat, hammered very thin and with cucumber inside and bacon. I've never eaten that
That sounds good.
as much as at
Bacon.
home. You have it in some restaurants, but it's not that. And that's in the homesickness for something where actually you have to be honest to yourself and tell you this home or this factor of home doesn't exist anymore. And you have this quite often with refugees also. They dream of a past world which has stopped to exist. Like example, many Iranians who came 10, 15, 20 years ago already to Germany, they miss an Iran which doesn't exist, and the closest to something which reminds them of home are actually some suburbs of Los Angeles, where also many Armenian live. So the worst is if you can't create a new home and then are homesick for something which doesn't exist. But not to be homesick, I think, is neither normal and not desirable, because memories are also something heartwarming, even if paired with a tear occasionally. I think that's human. That's one of our dimensions.
Yeah, and to use it positively, you can actually, it gives you a boost.
Motivation, yes. Yeah. We all are often homesick for our childhood memories, for instance, right? The emotions that we had back then, but that will never repeat because certain things were quite new back then.
I
Scents, tastes, feelings, and
but
now
it's
different.
like photographs. It's really, in my eyes, it's not full long episodes. It's moments, like Sunday afternoon cake with babushka. It's really surprising also what is left in the back of the mind, and suddenly, unexpected, but triggered by something, pops up. So homesick at home, yes, it's possible, but it's not negative. It's something.
It's something positive. Yeah. And we have something that just popped up, the advertisement break.
Here we go again.
A couple of minutes and we'll be back with our cozy family, amazing, friendly and emotional and very kind talk with our wonderful guest, Christoph. Stay tuned. This is Homesick at Home. We have another 10 minutes to go, so do not miss this opportunity to hear our chat.
Ina, I thought this was an English-speaking show. Are we on air? Yes. Every Friday night. Homesick at Home.
Dear listeners of Radio Van and Homesick at Home, we have such an interesting guest, and we have so many questions still to ask, and we're in a panic that we have 5 more minutes. So let's give a word to Christoph Bierwirth, and we hope that he will he will make it in 5 minutes, because we have so many things yet to say.
Now you're very wise. You pass the dilemma of prioritization to me. But on your questions related to the future and what to think, I would really like to share with your listeners one book recommendation. Maybe the book in the last 3 years I read which touched me most. It's from an Armenian origin writer living in Romania since many generations, Varujon Voskanyan. It's called The Book of Whisper, Dirk Sheshuk.
Yes.
It's about the history. It's not so martial aspects, military aspects focused as other books like 40 Days of Musadak. And it deals a lot with dilemmas in Armenian history, including questions of Armenians finding themselves on 2 sides of front lines, on 2 sides of debates, and maybe looking at such a book helps in dealing with the history at such historic moment. One completely different point I would like to add in conclusion, if you permit me. We spoke about refugee protection, we spoke about mandates, we spoke about NGOs, but I would like to share with your readers, it's not just for the, in quotation marks, so-called professionals. It's everyone at his or her place, as a student, as a neighbor, as a salesperson, as a friend on the street, can help refugees to feel welcome. And it's a little gestures which give the positive, the welcoming atmosphere. It can be the student who shows his fellow Syrian student who just starts around, shows the campus, shows the library.
Yes.
It could be the taxi driver who makes sure he doesn't overcharge. It
True.
could be the
Yes.
landlord who is fair in the rental conditions. And I just would encourage everyone to think of how tough it is to have lost everything, home, often loved ones, start a new life, and a helping hand, a little skitka, sometimes a smile. All these little things can help as
Definitely.
much as the systemic efforts
Yes.
the UN and first and foremost the government, the UN and the NGOs do. And to your radio program, I want to wish you all the very, very best. I
Thank you.
think of the crane that sometimes you will pass on the sound from home. And try once more. Leshvuma me ashraren chaprik kelesek lure tser ashraritz. Thank you very much. Shad shnora
It was
kolis.
very touching.
Mr. Bierwirth, we would like to say a big thank you and to
Yes.
appreciate your time and your presence here with us
And
in
your
their
spirit.
studio.
Merci.
Thank you for reminding us once again about the humanity values that we often forget during the day. And of course, this is something that we will keep in our heart and remember and try to remind to ourselves as well.
Shukran. Yes.
Thank you very much for this warm talk, cozy atmosphere, and of course, I would like to mention that our guest has
have
also
gifts.
a present for us.
Yes.
For each of you, yes, this is
Oh.
there's a camera, the UNHCR Cup.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I must say it's
cool.
produced
Two
in
cool
neighboring
cups.
Georgia as a joint Caucasus effort, but it's
Ah.
so colorful and it
Yes,
has a
it's beautiful.
dove of peace. That's what I wish your country and the whole region.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Peaceful
Thank
future.
you very much.
This will be our personal cups.
Thank you. Thank you.
We won't give them
Yes.
to anyone. Thank you
Such
so
beautiful.
much.
Thank
You so much. Thank you for being in our studio. This was a wonderful Friday night,
Yes.
and we wish to everybody that they will have this spirit continuing.
Start the weekend with
Yeah.
this spirit and continue on.
Yeah, we send this energy to everybody that was
Receive,
who was-
receive,
who was
receive.
listening to us. Thank you once again. This was Homesick at Home. We had the honor to host Christoph Bierwirth in our studio. And once again, hello to his guardian angel, Anahit, who was cheering for him all this time.
It was our pleasure.
C'est une merci.
C'était sous tune.